Hello, it's Tuesday at 6:30, so it's time again for What We're Reading, and you're in for a treat because tonight I have my two favorite book talkers on the planet. They're both from the Cascade branch. We've got Cascade's manager, Vanessa Wallstra, and Nanette Zorn, their librarian. Hey, Vanessa and Nanette. And they're going to do most of the talking tonight. You guys will be happy to learn because while you might think that librarians get to read all the time and can read whatever you want, that's not necessarily the truth. I have a couple of book discussions coming up this week. I am going to be co-hosting the Anti-Racist Book Club Wednesday night. So if you're interested in Zooming with us and talking about Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram Kendi, it's a fabulous book and we're getting very in-depth. We're breaking it up. So we're checking out the middle part this time. So kdl.org/events if you want to sign up. Vanessa, you had a question?
Is that one the one that's that Jason Reynolds sort of revamped or no?
Yes. Okay. Jason Reynolds wrote a teen version of that, kind of putting it in friendlier language and with much bigger speed. The Ibram Kendi is fascinating, very scholarly, and it's a really great and accurate picture of the history of racism in this country, and it's really fabulous. We did a book discussion on it already, and the discussion was so well liked that everyone there wanted to do it again, but break it up into pieces because they had a lot more to say. It's something that you really get into and talk about. And then in the Amy Van Andel branch is having its first in-person book discussion.
No, in person.
In person, because we have our beautiful courtyard in the middle of the library that is really kind of outside. So we get to meet outside in our courtyard and talk about River of Doubt, which is one of KDL core books. This one talks about,
let me throw that out and say they need to read that book and come to your discussion. It's so good.
So good. History that will have you gasping and wanting to find out what happens. So very exciting. But enough from me. Vanessa, let's start with you. What are you reading right now?
Well, what to do? Okay, so we have. I wasn't going to do this one right away, but what you were talking about from Stamped from the Beginning, and I've been reading the book by Heather McGhee called "The Sum of Us," and it is the subtitle is "What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together." And it's so good and so accessible. It's not super dense, but it has this really great look at what are the downsides to racism that you wouldn't necessarily think about, and how it impacts every single person. So the great thing that she gives to us right away is the analogy of the empty pool, and the empty pool. Is around the turn of the century, like 1900s, into like the 30s and 40s, there were a lot of civic improvement projects, and these civic improvement projects often included a community pool, and they were really, really, really popular. And when it was decided that they needed to integrate them, many communities, instead of actually integrating the pool, they just covered it over. They just filled it in. And so what she was basicn't, that's sort of the analogy she gives for a lot of things, that hurt everybody. That decision didn't just hurt people who didn't already have access to the pool. It hurt the people that had access to the pool. And then she sort of breaks it down into a variety of different things in different areas. And it's so good. It's really, really good. Heather McGhee. That's what I'm actually reading right now. I'm not done with it. I'm reading right now. So, yeah.
And Vanessa, am I right in thinking, because I heard some reviews of this, did she actually talk about the financial repercussions and the money issues that racism causes?
Yeah.
How does she break that down into what it costs us financially?
I have not gotten into, I don't have enough on the details on that. She does talk about that. She also talks about things like things you would never think about. So libraries, for instance. In the North, there were lots and lots and lots of libraries and other educational institutions. But in the South, pre and also post-Civil War, because it was a slave economy, the they didn't need to educate their people because they had their workers, and they didn't need to invest in people. So what ended up happening was, if you might have, I think there were thousands of libraries in the North, and there were like maybe 700 in the South. They just didn't have those same institutions structurally to encourage people to learn more and to increase their skills and whatnot. So it's a really interesting read. It's really, really good. It sounds like somebody's typing to me. Does it sound like it's?
Yes, it goes away when I mute Miss Nanette's mic. So something might be going on there.
Okay. I'm sorry. Is that better?
Oh, that's okay. Technical difficulties are so much fun.
Yes. We don't go for perfection.
It makes everyone in the audience say, oh my goodness, that only happens to me. No, it happens to everybody. It's still making that smack noise. It sounds like one of those aliens that eat people.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It's like I'm typing the Great American Novel while we're online here.
For sure.
Let's see if it goes away when you talk, Miss Nanette. Tell us about a book.
Okay, so I found a sticker today that describes me to a T, and it says on it, I'm emotionally attached to fictional characters.
Yes.
That is me. And so one of the ways I've been sort of processing all of the sort of racial polarization that's happened in this country in the last year is just eating up as much diverse fiction as I possibly can. And so one of the things that I would like to talk about is this new book by Nancy Johnson called The Kindest Lie. It's a debut novel, and I believe the author was a journalist for like ABC and CBS for a while. And it starts in 2008 when Obama is just newly elected, and the main character is a woman named Ruth. She's a Black woman, Ivy League educated engineer, and she's kind of just settling down into her life with her husband, who also is quite successful, and they live in Chicago. And now that they're settled, he begins to kind of put pressure on her to start a family, and it retreats and kind of goes into herself. And unbeknownst to him, she had a child when she was 17 that she gave up for adoption. Oh. And it was a very traumatizing experience because nobody knew about it except her and her grandmother who raised her. And so she has not processed the loss, the decision. She really had nothing to her grandma basically decided that that she was going to have a better life than her daughter did. Ruth's mother ended up dying of a drug addiction. And so the grandmother's like, you're going to have a better life than your mother did, and this will deter you for the rest of your life. So we're going to just kind of deal with it without you worrying about it. And and
that's the way it works, right?
Yeah. Lying is bad. Okay, there's no be honest, people.
Yes.
So she returns to her hometown in Indiana, and what she finds is, although the country's sort of on this like rising tide of hope with the Obama administration, that town in Indiana there is a lot of racial strife. There is a lot of there's a huge economic downturn when the plant that employs some of her family members closes. So there's all of these tensions in her hometown. She returns alone. It's set in around the holidays. So of course, emotions are peaked. And when she returns, she kind of, before she even returns to her home, she meets a young boy about the age of what her son would be. And he's a white child, and he is living in terrible circumstances and doesn't have a close family life. And she befriends him. And so it's about their friendship and her going back and to try to unearth what happened in this traumatizing experience. And then as she gets closer to discovering who in this town, if anyone, is her son, she discovers stuff about like a lawyer that did some shaky deals with adoption, and her grandmother was involved with that, and the church was involved. And as she's kind of trying to uncover who her child was and is, and if she can meet him so she can therefore reconcile with her husband, this incident happens between this racial incident happens in town and sort of forces the issue all the way around. So it was one of those books that we were talking about earlier where you just have this rush in your heart where you're like, oh no, this is not going to be the way it ends.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Don't tell us how it ends, but was it satisfying?
I will not tell you how it ends. But I will tell you that all things considered, it does have a sense of resolution that as a reader I could deal with.
Satisfying.
Yeah, I don't think those kinds of books really have a happy ending, but
yeah.
Anyway, as I was reading it, I didn't really know how I felt about it, but it's one of those books that's kind of festered, and I've been thinking about after I set it down. So I would recommend it. It is.
I don't think fester is the word we want. I think it's resonating. It's not fester. Which will land the boil at the end of the book. We were having that discussion earlier, just off camera. We should have probably been having it on camera about like the books that like ended up giving us that feeling of, you know. And we were talking about, I think one of the ones that I had and was Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, and I just want to do a shout out because he just passed away in March. So if you want a really great older, my age-ish novel, you should pick up Lonesome Dove. But I remember that was my first, like, I fell in love with a character. Maybe not the first. The first character I fell in love with was Stan Crandall from Beverly Cleary's 15. Beverly Cleary just died, so pick up a Beverly Cleary book. That's all I'm saying. So
I fell in love with Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, I have to say. Strider. Yeah. Strider would die for me.
Who was your first book crush? Nanette, did you have a book crush?
No.
No? Really? Oh,
no.
I have a crush
for her husband, Vanessa.
I'm sorry. My bad.
I didn't even fall for the guy in the Kiss Quotient.
Oh, there you go. See? Yeah. And so I have a kind of a fun little one this time next year by Sophie Cousins. This is, it was a GMA book club pick, and I had heard it as a really good, like I lots of times will do like a end of the year, best of 2020 kind of books, or what's hot coming out kind of books. And this was on the list, and it was really fun. It was a very, had a very When Harry Met Sally vibe, or like Sleepless in Seattle, Nora Ephron kind of a vibe to it.
Rom-com.
Yeah, it was a rom-com, but so the premise of the story is that these two characters are born on the same day. It's New Year's Day in England, in London, and the first baby born in the new year gets $50,000. And these two women are laboring together and are telling each other stories. One of the women said, when I have this baby, I'm naming it Quinn. Quinn is the name I want. And it means something to her. And it can be a boy or a girl name, no big deal. And so she has her baby. They both get separated to have the final baby having. And they find out that the woman who was not planning to name her child Quinn won the money and named the baby Quinn. Little boy named Quinn. And the woman says, the other woman is like, you stole my name, you get the money. You know, she's trying to avoid having the baby until like that first moment. You stole the name, you had the money. I can't name my child Quinn anymore. They end up naming their child Minnie, only their last name is Cooper. And so it doesn't come out very well.
They did not.
And so anyway, you find that it starts New Year's Eve. Minnie has gone to a party with her boyfriend, and the party is, she doesn't really want to be there. Something always goes wrong on New Year's Eve for her, and New Year's Day is always terrible, and she just feels jinxed. Starting out from it's part of the family folklore that because of all what happened at her birth, she's just kind of under a rain cloud, and she ends up getting stuck in the bathroom. The doorknob stops working, like it so she ends up being like 7 or 8 hours in the bathroom at this party. And the person who lets her out of the bathroom turns out to be Quinn, who was born on the same day. And they end up sort of intersecting over and over and over again. Their lives just keep kind of overlapping. And it's really the story of how they've overlapped over the years without knowing it, and then how they develop this friendship. It is not like if you're looking for Bridgerton, this is not it. Bridgerton, is all the, the sexy. And this is definitely more like what kinds of, what kind of relationship do they develop, and what kind of friendship do they have? And her life looks like it's falling apart, and his life looks like it's like full of win, but he's got issues too. And it's just it was a really fun read. So if you're looking for something that's just kind of fun, enjoyable, rom-com-y, this Time Next Year by Sophie Cousin is a great pick.
Now, just your description of it made me laugh out loud. So is it funny too?
It's funny. It's cute. Yeah, it's really cute. So Minnie Cooper and Quinn, they
That's one of the hardest things when patrons come into the library for me to stick my fingers on is, can you give me a book that's funny?
Yes. It is hard because that is a very subjective thing. What do you find? It's not slapstick funny, but it's really humorous, but it's got a little poignancy to it. And it really did remind me of those those rom-coms, the Harry Met Sally one, those two specifically, when Harry Met Sally and Sleepless in Seattle, because it had this sort of like, it's all moving toward this conclusion of, it was fun. It was really fun.
I like both those movies, so I'm going to have to check it out. Yeah. I'm going to unmute Nanette. I'm sorry, Nanette, I've been muting you because the bloop, 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 bloop. So we'll see. You have to come up with a book, and we'll see if we can hear you well. You're live.
So I have to confess that I lied. I do have a book crush, but you can't laugh.
Okay. Well, first of all, didn't you take your own advice? You don't lie. Stop lying. Okay.
I laugh at everything.
Moscow is my boy crush.
Oh no, I love him.
Yeah.
Too. I won't laugh. I love him.
I miss him every day. I hear his voice in my head.
That's so sweet.
He's a little bit my senior, but that's okay. We're gonna call it good.
So was Lonesome Dove. Way my senior.
I heard, Nanette, that they're making a movie out of that, and they're talking about Kenneth Branagh to play him. And Kenneth Branagh's like my movie star crush, and the character he's going to play is my book crush. So this could be dangerous for my husband.
That could be dangerous.
The question I have about that, though, is does the guy from The Gentleman in Moscow have lips? Because Kenneth Branagh does not really have lips. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know. Do you need lips to eat bouillabaisse? Because I know there's a scene with bouillabaisse.
I love Kenneth Branagh. He's amazing, but he does not have a lot of lip.
I'm gonna have to think about that.
Yeah.
I think I could live with without it.
one of the books that I read recently, which dovetails nicely in with what you talked about, because although it's set during World War II, and I know there are fans of World War II fiction out there, but I also know there are people that are like, I've had enough of historical fiction from World War II. But this one is an outlier in some ways because it has a lot of levity in it, and I really loved the dialogue and the adventures that that happened in this book. It's called The City of Thieves, and it's by David, I think it's pronounced Benioff, Benioff. I don't have the book with me because I listened to it. But it is about these two, I mean, for lack of a better term, they're kind of rascals. Like one.
Well, that's a good word.
I like much better than fester.
Yeah.
One of them is, so they're Russian. They're slowly being starved in their country. They're being surrounded by Germans, and they
Is this Leningrad, the siege?
Yes. So
Mm-hmm.
one of them, a German soldier lands within the area where the Russians are, and so him and his friends ransack the Russians, but everything is in such a short supply because they're being starved out of their home that anything, even though that they were doing it against the enemy, they could die for ransacking the German. So his friends get away and he is captured, and that is Lev. That's one of the main characters. The other fellow is his complete opposite. He's like a poet, and he's like a few years older. He is a ladies' man, and it ends up kind of. You find out what happened later in the story, but I don't want to ruin it because it's one of the adventures that kind of sticks with you. But he's known to be a deserter in the Russian army. So they find themselves in the crosses, and they think they're in the same cell at night, and they're sure they're going to wake up and die. But instead, the person who runs the crosses has them both into his office in the morning, and has them look out the window at this skating rink. And on the skating rink is this beautiful young woman skating. And it's his daughter who is engaged to be married. It's the person who runs the cross's daughter who's engaged to be married. And she needs a wedding cake. And they need 12 eggs. They need 12 eggs in order to make the cake. And so he sends these two prisoners off on an adventure to find 12 eggs when they are literally eating book binding as protein.
My word!
To survive. So the premise is just, it's so ludicrous that and one adventure leads to another. They end up being like, they get, I think the officer gives them a piece of paper that says that they can do whatever they need to do, that there's no curfew for them. And they're given like 400 rubles, which will buy you like one piece of bookbinding to eat. You know, it's nothing. So they basically are left to their wits to try to get this. And they have like 4 or 5 days to do it. And
so can't they just run away?
What? I'm sorry?
Can't they just escape? Can't they just say, okay, yeah, we're going to go look for eggs now, and then run away?
That would not be a zany plot, Penny.
From what I understand from this book, they don't have any freedom to do anything. Like everything is being, you know, they can't even, they're very much, you know, under the watchful eye of both the Russians and the Germans. So,
okay.
Anyway, the thing that is really wonderful about the story, the dialogue is amazing, and Lev is like a virginal, you know, kind of a little bit of a troublemaker, but just kind of trying to get by in his life. And this other character, I think his name's Kroyo, or I can't remember his name. Anyway, he is like a couple years older, has women whenever he wants. I mean, that's how he gets himself into more than one adventure.
Yeah.
And he's extremely literate, and he can talk himself out of every situation. So it is just hilarious. And
He's the guy I want tracking down my eggs, I think.
That's right. That's right.
What's that?
He's the guy I want tracking down my eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really surprised that it somehow flew under my radar. It was published, like, I don't know, it's an older book, 2008, but I will tell all you listeners out there that this was recommended to me by a patron, and every time something's recommended to me by a patron, I usually try to read it. And I just ate it up. I loved it, and it was hilarious. I was laughing out loud on my walks. And, you know, I love those kind of coming of age stories too, and with these impossible situations, but there were so many adventures thrown in and marvelous dialogue. So that is the City of Thieves. And I believe, Vanessa, you said that he also wrote some
Game of Thrones. He wrote Game of Thrones. Yeah, or co-wrote it. Yeah. So he's something.
For the script for Kite Runner.
Yeah, yes, and the script for Kite Runner. So he has reign, is what I'm hearing.
Obviously.
Yeah, I've got that. I actually have the book on, I think, on my bedside, like my stack. I just haven't gotten to it yet. It's going to the top, Nanette. It's going to the top. Awesome.
Definitely. Well, you guys are amazing. Do you have any more books you absolutely have to talk about before we close it up?
Oh, just Penny, you've read this, so I want to talk about this just briefly. Long Bright River by Liz Moore. This was not zany, and it was not happy exactly. It reminded me a lot of like Dennis Lehane. Did you ever read any Dennis Lehane? It reminded me very much of that. And it's really all about somebody who works on the police force, and she discovers a dead body during her rounds, and she is in constant fear. It's in Philadelphia. She's in constant fear that the next dead body she's going to find is her sister's, because her sister has an out of control opioid addiction. And so she is trying to figure out who this murder turns out to be one of like a string of murders, all of which are happening with people who have out of control addictions and are primarily living on the street, or they're just sort of together in a sort of flop house kind of a situation. And so she ends up really trying to figure out what's happening to these girls, and then also trying to figure out like what has happened with her sister, because she has lost touch with her. So she's just terribly afraid that something's going to happen to her sister. And that is not zany or funny. And maybe it's not the what we should have like ended on. I think maybe we should have ended with Lev or something like that. But I did really, really like it. So if you're looking for kind of a thought-provoking mystery thriller, The Long Bright River by Liz Moore was really, really good.
Yeah, and Liz Moore was at our Literary Libations.
Yes.
And talked about that book. Whenever we have a libations crew, I always have to read a book from everyone. So that's what prompted me to read that one. And it was very touching. You don't think of it that way as a police officer. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they do, because I mean, so many people have the opioid addiction in their family, know someone. To have that fear as a police officer that the next body you find is going to be, and that was a very real fear, because those were the people being blocked. So it was very touching in that way, but also to learn that how sometimes these people are treated differently by law enforcement.
Yes.
Which isn't really, don't be so naive, Penny. Of course they are, but the way that the crime with them is handled, if they're the victim, the way that everything is, the whole point of view changes for so much of that. And that was really eye-opening at a time when we're really investigating how police work happens and what things. So it had that interesting connection too.
Yeah, it was really interesting, that part. Yeah, I thought it was really poignant. I thought it was really, and just really thought-provoking, just really, really good. And I was telling you earlier that there's a new book coming out, a nonfiction book called Empire of Pain, which is about the Sackler family.
Well, another cheery one, I'm sure.
No, right? So, like, what else can I tell you that would depress you?
Empire of Pain.
Empire of Pain was great. And let me talk to you more about Death and Destruction. But that one is actually about the Sackler family who made all their money pushing the opioids. And so that I'm really looking for. I'm looking forward to that light read. But, I am actually looking forward to it. I think it'll be really interesting. But it's
talked about how these, when you read these subjects, it's more digestible. We were saying that, you know, when you read a hard book like Vanessa reading Lonesome Dove
mm-hmm.
or Kite Runner or things like that, it's a tough subject. You can digest it at your own pace, and you're creating the pictures in your head. And sometimes you can read about that horror and sadness and learn about it and take from it, whereas you can't see it on a screen.
Right. We talked about that, like about the fact that it's too emotional. Some of these things that we watch that we've read, we just can't revisit it or see it differently. But yeah.
There's
so I think
there's something
it's better
more
to get that. Yes.
I'm
cutting you off, Nanette.
Okay.
Before
we go though, Nanette, I want you to talk really briefly, because I think this is great to get out, about changing the speed on your audiobook.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about it before we went on air, and yeah, if you listen to your books on e-audio, which I know a lot of you are e-audio readers, you can adjust the speed and listen to it faster, which can be dangerous. It can be dangerous.
Yeah.
But you can listen to more books, and you can listen to the books faster. So you can adjust.
Talk about addiction. All of us are like, let's get more.
You can mainline the book.
So it's the speed setting, and the only thing is, the warning is that you can't adjust it on CDs. So if you do both, then you will find yourself bored to tears once you listen to a standard time.
If somebody is listening to it with you, you might want to warn them, because the audiobook my husband and I listened to on our vacation, he was like, this man speaks so fast. What is wrong with him? It was awesome.
We read the book, listen slowly on faster speed, and my kids were like, are you kidding me, Mom? Are you?
It's always great to talk to Vanessa and Nanette. Fast or slow, I don't care. I'll listen to you guys all day. You are so fabulous. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me,
Tuesday.